Welcome to Episode 2 of Health Rebels, where today we're speaking with fellow plant-based cyclist, GiGi Carter. So GiGi Carter, I think this is as good a time as any to get started. Welcome. You're speaking to us from Mississippi, the great state of Mississippi, about your health journey. Let me welcome. Thank you, GiGi Carter.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to start off with paint us a picture of who GiGi Carter was before your sort of plant-based journey. And can you kind of tell us, when did that plant-based journey start?
Yes. So to answer the first part of your question, as far as who GiGi Carter was before going plant-based, I would say GiGi Carter was someone who was on autopilot through life.
Okay.
I was very, very sedentary in the sense of my energy level was not all that great. I always found it, to be a challenge just to get through the day at times. And despite the amount of caffeine or sugary snacks I would consume, it just never seemed to help. And this was particularly true as I kind of moved into my mid to late 30s. I really felt it quite a bit. And I really tried to find ways to get more healthy. I mean, I would go to the gym a couple times a week. I would walk my dogs. But I think what it boiled down to was the food that I was putting into my body and how I was fueling it. And what I did was I started experimenting with a few things and ultimately decided to try to go vegetarian. So I set a goal for myself that I would eat vegetarian once a day or once a week, one day a week, and that I would gradually increase that. And so over the course of about 6 months, and this was between January 2012 and June 2012, I transitioned to a vegetarian diet. Shortly after kind of claiming myself as a vegetarian, I decided to go plant-based, and it was really sparked by a couple of documentaries that I watched. And so I would say I've been plant-based since middle of July 2012.
Middle of July 2012. That's terrific. What were those documentaries that sparked your interest? Did you hear me on that one? Did you hear me? Hello, come in. You can probably hear me now.
I can hear you now.
Okay, it was on mute because my dog was barking. What documentaries sparked your interest in going plant-based?
There were two that I watched within 1 week of each other. The first one was Forks Over Knives. I watched it. I can remember watching it it was a weekend. And I think I saw it on, I don't know if I got it on a DVD, but I somehow got a hold of it and watched it. And then about a week later, like the next weekend, I watched a documentary called Earthlings. Mm-hmm. And that just really changed it for me. I think that, the health motivation was there, but I would say the bigger motivation was really around kind of the treatment of animals and how I was contributing to that, despite the fact that I was calling myself an animal lover because I had some dogs that I had rescued. So it really opened my eyes to how I was contributing to the treatment of animals, and that is really what took it over the edge. And to be honest with you, after watching that, I immediately went whole food plant-based vegan. I did not purchase any animal products after that time.
That's an interesting observation, or what you said about how you sort of went plant-based because of your more animal rights. And people, I think that's important because people have their own reasons. Some people, it's specifically for I have heart disease that runs in my family. I have diabetes that runs in my family. Others, it's more animal rights. Others, it's more maybe environmental. So,
Mhm.
and it can be a mix of all three of those as well. So that's great. That's terrific. Can you, besides the low energy levels, can you say that you were sort of suffering or had any other kind of chronic ailments that maybe resolved after going plant based?
I would say there were a few things. I was about 10 to 15 pounds heavier than I am today, and
And
the
you look
mental.
terrific, by the way.
Oh, thank you. The mental clarity really improved after going plant based. My cholesterol went down about 23% just a few months after going plant based. In fact, when I was in my 30s, I went to a doctor for a routine visit, and he wanted to put me on a statin drug. And I just refused outright. I mean, I said, look, I'm only in my 30s. I must have been in my mid to late 30s. And I just refused to do it. And so I was going, a few years without probably having elevated cholesterol, definitely having elevated cholesterol, but
Mm-hmm.
not being on a statin drug.
Mm.
So when I went plant based, I saw those numbers improve significantly. My triglycerides went down, my bad cholesterol went down, and so it showed in the data.
That's terrific. If you were, I think you already mentioned a few things up to this point. Can you tell us what were some of your most destructive or bad habits that you kicked once you went plant based?
Well, I would say, it's interesting. I was probably drinking a lot more than I used to. Oh, well, excuse me. I was definitely drinking a lot more than I do today.
Mm-hmm.
And I still drink alcohol, but I drink it at, a level that it doesn't get in the way of my ability to enjoy life. And I think I was masking some things with the alcohol, just maybe some things that I wasn't really happy with in my life. And so, I would come home from work. This was my routine. I would come home from work. I would, sit on the couch. I would crack open a bottle of wine. I'd probably drink a glass of wine before dinner, a glass of wine with dinner. And my dinner was what I thought was healthy at the time, chicken breast and whatever. But it was kind of a cycle. It was like an everyday thing. I'm at a point now where I might drink once or twice a week, and it is only one drink. It's very seldom that I'll drink more than one drink unless I'm at a party or something. I've got a bunch of friends over, but my I would say alcohol consumption has gone down significantly to a level that I think is more healthy. And that's not to say, that, there are, that you can't be healthy without drinking alcohol. Of
Right.
course you can.
Right.
But I would just say for me, it was kind of, I was able to get that, what was turning into a very destructive behavior, under control. And I would say, in addition to that, the exercise. I wasn't consistent. I was going to the gym sporadically. I wasn't necessarily. I was trying to do the minimum required, I guess, is what was being recommended. And today, I would say I've gone from exercising to training.
Hmm.
And the training has really kind of opened, kind of a new side of me that I never thought existed. I've become a competitive athlete, whereas, the people that knew me from high school, I know are just shocked because I never played competitive sports. I was the kind of kid who came home from school and would watch TV and do my homework and go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've kind of really moved in a different direction just because I do have all this energy, and I have kind of gotten in touch with my true self. as a result of going plant-based.
Terrific. And I think we will, and a little bit later in this interview, get into more of the physical activity kind of before and after. And I'm going to let you elaborate on your endurance cycling. And I think I just want to touch on, I think that the alcohol is a very good point. I think it's very relatable to a lot of people. I think from what I've observed, I'm 28 years old, and my fiance and I have observed from a lot of our friends that they are sort of extending what they did in college. And I'm not saying you were a binge drinker. I'm saying the binge drinking that some of our friends and that's more acceptable in college, it seems to go with our young adult friends and young professionals as they get into the working world. So I think it's very relatable, and it's a very powerful message that you said, hey, I cut down on it and it felt a lot better. So good for you. Can you told us about how your cholesterol got better, and some other changes, but can you just note any other physical, mental, spiritual changes you saw from going plant-based?
Yeah, that's interesting. The spiritual piece, that's a really, really a good question, because I've never actually come out and said this to anyone, but and I'm not trying to say this to criticize or to to offend anyone. I used to go to church. And I was always looking for, getting in touch with God.
Mm-hmm.
And what was interesting to me was that after going plant-based, there was definitely a spiritual awakening within me, such that I've come to realize that God is within me. And even though I've heard people say that before, it didn't really resonate with me until after going plant-based. And I really think what happened was that I was living authentically. I've come to live more authentically and live in line with what my values are, and the degree to which I can cause as little harm as possible to others, that I can be a person of peace and love and forgiveness and live my life that way. It really, did, after going plant-based and going vegan, help me to become that person that I've always wanted to be, but never really, I think, knew what that was growing up. And so I would say my spirituality has increased significantly, in the sense that I feel much more in touch than I did when I was growing up, and even into my 30s.
Well, that's terrific. I think it's important for people to show, or to see and observe, that not only, people who go plant-based, do they lose weight, do their cholesterol gets better, but I think it's hard to sometimes objectify the spirituality part and sort of the mental clarity part. And I think you did that very, very well just now. And that's, again, it's something powerful that people can be inspired by. So good for you. I want to touch on your physical activity. You said before you went plant-based, you were sort of sporadic in the gym. And I read your Forks Over Knives profile. You are a competitive cyclist, and I've seen a few pictures of you racing around in criteriums, I believe. And you also competed in a 24-hour ultra endurance bicycle race. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I started cycling about 3.5 years ago, and it started out with a friend of mine at work who invited me to join a team who was basically doing this charity ride in Michigan. They have it every year for the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and it was 300 miles over 3 days. So I hired a coach who I also worked with, and he put me on a plan to get me to a level to be able to complete that ride um, over the 3 days, the 300 miles over 3 days. So um, after doing my first long ride, I think my first long ride was around 30 miles or so. I was just hooked. I just became hooked on cycling, and so what happened was after completing that ride, I said to myself, "Hey, if I still want to get on a bicycle after doing 300 miles in 3 days, so it's basically 100 miles a
Mm-hmm.
day, that I was gonna treat myself to a new bicycle. I'd get one of those fancy carbon fiber bikes."
Good.
So I did, and I continued to ride, and I was then invited to join a race team here in the Metro Jackson, Mississippi area. I agreed to do that, and later, it must have been the fall of 2014, I actually competed in my first ultra endurance event, which was a double century in Florida. And I was racing, I think there were two or three other men that were doing that same race. And it was pretty funny because I ended up coming in first place, and when I came into the finish line, the guy that was kind of organizing the race for Race Across America, it was he just thought it was awesome. He's like, "You won, and you're the girl."
Yeah.
It was just like it was so fascinating. I should have told him, "Yeah, and I'm also the vegan girl."
Right. How?
But I didn't think to do that. But anyway.
That's okay.
So that was kind of the first ultra endurance event. And then later on, a few months after that, I decided to do the 24-hour race in Bessie's Creek. And I came in first place for that. And that was kind of an interesting race in the sense that you're going in a circle you're just repeating the circle. It's a 21.3-mile loop, and you're just repeating it for 24 hours. And it took a lot. That one was probably more mentally exhausting because you are going in a circle, but was a great experience just in terms of, putting myself in a very, challenging situation physically and mentally, and, coming through on top at the end.
Did you have a support crew for either the 200-mile race or the 24-hour race?
I did. My husband and my sister were my support crew for both.
And what were some of your? This is a question I'm going to get into later about your regular everyday plant-based staples. But what were some of your foods that you ate during the 24-hour and the 200-mile race?
Yeah, so a lot of it was nuts and seeds and dried fruit. So things that were calorically dense.
Right.
Were definitely staples. I think I had a couple of avocado wraps in tortilla with a little bit of sea salt sprinkled, just to kind of, just mix it up a little bit. But it was primarily, nuts, seeds, like trail mix.
Right. Yeah. And have you given any thought to doing the Race Across America, RAM?
I have thought about it. The time commitment to train for that is really, really high.
It's huge.
It's almost a full-time job, honestly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would say that's the biggest barrier for me. I just don't have the time to train at that level.
And you could always do it. You could always start out at a 4-person team. I think we completed a 4-person team in 2015, and that was very manageable. Still a big time commitment, and you can work your way up to a 2-man team, and if you wanted to do it solo. But I completely agree with you. I knew, and I rode with a gentleman in Atlanta, Georgia, who during 2015 did RAM, dropped out. I passed him in just outside of Bloomington, Indiana, and his crew chief said, "I think we're going to throw in the towel. We're not going to make it." But this year he did it again and he made it. So it's a great success story. I hopefully can get in for an interview too. And how about everyday staples, everyday plant-based staples? What are some foods you gravitate towards?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I kind of stick with the same breakfast and lunch a lot, but dinner tends to vary. Breakfast is usually sprouted grain toast with almond butter, and I'll stick a banana in there, or some sliced banana, or I might do some jam with it. And I love my oatmeal. I mean, I cannot go a day without having a nice big bowl of oatmeal.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll typically add things like chia seeds and some, different berries and bananas and fruit, maybe some raisins or dates to that. My lunch, lunch is often, this is where I feel like, okay, I gotta make sure I get all my veggies in. And so I'll usually do like a huge salad,
Mm-hmm.
with a rainbow of different colors of vegetables to make sure I'm getting all the variety of nutrients, that I know my body needs. So I'll literally look at my plate or my bowl, depending on what I'm using, and I'll just kind of just scan to make sure I've got the colors I
Right.
want in there. Um, and I'll snack on things like hummus and baby carrots, or things like that. And dinner is it's wide open. I mean, I make my husband loves this Alfredo sauce, this fettuccine Alfredo, and I use like cauliflower, to kind of make the Alfredo sauce. It's really good. I will make there's a Indian dish that I like to make, chana masala.
Mm.
Vegan pizzas are, a favorite. I make a veggie burger that I got from a cookbook, and I just kind of, adjust it a little bit. But there's a veggie burger I'll make, and then I'll freeze those. And if I'm in a hurry, I'll have something to pull out the freezer to make. But there's so much, and that was the other thing about going vegan. There were foods and spices and flavors I had never ever experimented with before until going vegan.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, for example, I was telling a friend of mine, we were out on a bike ride. I had never bought a mango before going vegan. That's not to say I hadn't had mango, in a chutney sauce or something like that, but I never like literally bought a mango
Yeah.
and like ate it until going vegan. And so there was things like that were pretty cool too.
They're one of my favorite fruits that I have in the morning with my oatmeal. I think an important message that I gleaned from your Forks Over Knives profile, and that you just sort of touched on, was the simplicity of this lifestyle. You can make it super complex if you want to. You can make a dish with 30 ingredients, but you can also make a dish with only a few ingredients. And you said that you like to keep things very simple.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, and one other thing I went on. I remember this is back in the fall. I went on a training. It was a group training ride, and I was riding with some elite level men on a 55-mile bike ride, and I hung with them up until about maybe 50 miles in. So I kind of got dropped the last 5 miles. I ended up catching up with them towards the very end, but I was the only woman. And after that ride, I went out and rode another, almost 30 miles after that. And I got home, and I can remember just barely being able to unclip from my bike. And I'm walking down the hall towards the kitchen, and my dog's licking my salty legs, and you
Mm-hmm.
know what dogs do. And I could hardly move. And the first thing I do is I go into the refrigerator. I grab, I think it was an orange or yellow bell pepper. I take that little sticker off of
Yeah.
it. I wash it off, and I sit there and I eat it like an apple. And it was like the best thing I had eaten. Like it was amazing. And I felt just the nutrients just go right into my bloodstream.
Mm-hmm.
And it gave me just enough energy to go hit the shower, come back and make, a bigger meal. But it's like it's okay to do stuff like that. You
Right.
can go into your refrigerator, you can grab a carrot stick, rinse it off, and just eat it plain.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can grab a bell pepper and do that. So I absolutely am a proponent of keep it simple.
And your tastes, once you ditch the super salty, super sweet, super fatty foods of a standard American diet, your taste buds change, your cravings change. And the next question I was going to ask you along this same vein is you no longer crave meat and cheese.
Right. Right.
which is
Absolutely.
super important. Where I know that is certainly something that people think a lot of is, well, probably the top three excuses I hear of why they can't go more plant based is I can never give up my cheese. Any tips for people out there who can't give up their cheese?
Well, I mean, anybody, I mean, I think it's all about what messaging you're playing in your head,
Mm-hmm.
So you can go through life saying you can't do this or you can't do that. And you just have to make a decision that, that I need to change that messaging that I'm playing in my head. And I was, the people that have known me for a long time, I was a cheese addict. I mean, I was always eating cheese. um, but once I removed that from my diet, everything just opened up because I honestly, I saw the biggest improvement in how I felt in my energy level when I gave up dairy altogether. And I would just say, start with your thoughts. Start with, for people who are trying to move down this path, start with what thoughts are you creating in your mind, and then how can you change those thoughts? And one of the tips that I've used personally is I start thinking the thoughts that I want to create, even if I don't believe them at first. I just start thinking that, and the more I repeat it over and over again, it starts to manifest.
Mm-hmm. And
And that would be my suggestion to people who, today maybe say they can't give up cheese.
I'm glad this is a great segue into the next question is, what suggestions would you give people who are struggling to commit to this lifestyle? Any more specific tips?
I would say, I think it comes down to kind of why they're struggling. And everybody's got a different reason for why they're struggling. For some people, it's social. They don't want to be the one that's eating different.
Mm-hmm.
For other people, it may be more, certain cravings. I would say that, there's different methods that people can use. I know a friend of mine who went plant-based. She decided to go on a kind of a juice fast. It was just a 3-day juice fast where she just juiced fresh vegetables over 3 days, just a variety of different vegetables. And when I say juice, it was more blended. It wasn't necessarily extracted, so she still had all the fiber and
Mm-hmm.
everything in it. And what that did for her was, because she was going from a standard American diet to plant-based, it helped her to kind of reset her palate. And so when she was transitioning off of that after 3 days, you know, she, she no longer had the same craving she had, before going into it. So she felt like that was the best way for her to do it. For other people, it might be more practical, like, hey, I've got a kid I've got to cook for, and, and I just, I don't think he or she's going to enjoy it. And one of the things that, I know my sister has done, and she's not plant-based, she's probably more of a flexitarian or vegetarian, but she's kind of gone and veganized some of her standard meals, like tacos. It used to be ground meat on taco night. Now she uses like a really neat like rice and bean mixture that her teenage son absolutely loved. So there's different things that you could do if there's a concern around turning over your pantry too quickly and not being able to do it, and really trying to figure out your go-to meals, or if it's more struggling because my taste buds are not there. There might be some things that you could do just to start to adjust that. And it could be, like what I said earlier, eating vegan 1 day a week and seeing what that's like, and then kind of increasing it from there.
Good. That's a good point. And something that I mentioned to a lot of people on my Facebook page and anywhere is just small steps. You don't have, you can, I guess, you can dive into this and go cold turkey. I personally don't think that is the best way. I think it's small steps. If you're comfortable with this small step, okay, take another small step. Kind of like what you just said. Besides Forks Over Knives movie and Earthlings, and I think in your article you cited that you bought the Forks Over Knives cookbook. Can you mention any other books or media or resources for people who would like to just simply become healthier?
Yes, I find myself using Oshi Glows, the Oshi Glows cookbook quite a bit. She's got some great recipes in there. I would say the Plant Power Way has some good recipes in it. And that's Rich Roll, Julie Pyatt's book. And then there's a ton of stuff online. Fat Free Vegan, her blog, Susan Boyson, who also happens to be based here in Jackson, Mississippi, and is actually very well known around the country and even the world, has a great catalog of different recipes. And she'll take other recipes and make, some modifications, give, people credit for it and everything. But she's got a great resource that I think, people can really benefit from.
I think we kind of reached the end here, and I'd like to, as always, open the floor up to our guest, GiGi Carter, with anything that we didn't mention that you'd like to say about your journey, about the plant-based lifestyle. The floor is open to you.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I would just say that, I think some people think it's hard. And I think it comes down to, if you really want to do it, you'll make it happen. And I will also say that, the only regret that I have as far as going plant-based is not doing it sooner. I really, I tell people this, who find out that, I'm plant-based vegan, that I've been doing this for over 4 years now. And, sometimes I'll get the reaction, wow, that must be hard. And I'll say, no, it's not. Once you figure out your go-to meals and everything, you're golden. I would say, and again, my regret is just, not doing this when, maybe in my 20s or 30s. But otherwise, I'm grateful that I am, and I'm excited to, help anybody that is interested in going down that path. And thank you for having me on your show.
Well, thank you. And do you have any social media platforms that people can reach you at?
Yes, well, I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Vegan Cycling Chick, are probably the two best ways to connect with me.
Cool. Well, I will definitely put those down in the description. We'll edit this movie. We'll put it up in about a week or so. But GiGi Carter, thank you very much for your time. You are a plant-based ambassador in the great state of Mississippi.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian.
We'll keep in touch.
Absolutely.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.